Hello everyone, welcome to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the last race of 2024. Joining me is Alex Kalinauckas. We have got loads to talk about, haven't we? Today, media day. Let's kick off with Max Verstappen versus George Russell.
Yeah, I mean, unexpectedly interesting is how this media day, considering the championships wrapped up. It's McLaren versus Ferrari that are contesting that, not Red Bull and Mercedes. And yeah, it's all completely exploded with George Russell and Max Verstappen. And of course, this all goes back to the Qatar Grand Prix, to qualifying, to their preparation runs ahead of the final laps in Q3, not even like impeding on a flying lap. And yeah, it was pretty spectacular from both sides, I thought. And I thought we'd just maybe explain to everybody sort of how it went down in the paddock.
Because let's just explain, because there was two separate press conferences, weren't there? I think Max had two goes and George has had two goes today. So four in total, and it was always one responding to the other. So please explain.
Correct, and we were pretty much there the whole way through. So yeah, I was part of a round table with selected other media, basically a season review with George Russell. I'm very glad I got in there early with asking him about how he's been so good in qualifying, and he puts that down to me, by the way, just being in a good place. He just says, I'm feeling really good this year, so fair enough. And then the question inevitably was, how's the relationship with Max Verstappen? And boy, did he just unload. There was no stopping him. I mean, we spoke to him for 25 minutes. It was a 15-minute point-making exercise from George. And I think we're going to get into sort of what's happened, why it's happening, what we make of it. But yeah, so George did that. Max Verstappen was then in the press conference. We published the story. The other media outlets published the story based on George's comments. And effectively, that was a right of reply because Max had very publicly called George out several times last weekend, and he hadn't really had the chance to respond to that. So Max then doubles down on it in the press conference, triples down on it, quadruples down on it. He was very clear he'd do it again, and if anything, be more flat out the next time. Then George Russell had his typical Thursday media appearance where he, answers questions in the Mercedes motorhome. Everybody, who's got a media pass can go and attend that. It had a bit of a difference though, didn't it?
It had a difference. I mean,
an interloper, I would say.
An interloper. Yeah, I mean, normally these sessions are usually a driver sitting down talking to a handful of media. This time was unusual. We had Toto Wolff come in and stand by George's left-hand side, which is really, really unusual. And, okay, he was listening to the way that this narrative was going, but he was itching to get involved. And at one point, he did get a couple of questions and replied. And he was talking in depth about Christian Horner. And I've written a piece on Autosport about this. And it seemed unusual for Toto to step in. His driver was doing a pretty good job of defending himself. And he called Christian Horner a terrier, a yapping little terrier, which I thought was interesting. It was almost like muscle memory of their wrists over the years. He stepped into this, and I don't think he really needed to, because as I say, George was holding his own. Obviously very, very cross with what Max Verstappen had said to him, going back to, like you say, in Qatar, which was, what did he actually say? Well,
it was, first of all, the day isn't even over yet. We've got Max Verstappen then had his press conference just with the Dutch media, and if you read the transcript of that, it's spectacular. He just, again, he unloads. He gives exactly what you'd expect from Max Verstappen. He just gives it back, both barrels, says what he thinks. But yeah, this all centres on, as I said, the qualifying incident, the penalty that then came from it. But I think lots of other little things then built up towards it. So George spoke about how he thought the issue in his mind was put to bed after they'd spoken to the stewards. He alleges that Max made this threat, I'm going to put you in the wall, I'm going to put you on your head, whatever. Basically, I'm going to crash into you at turn one when you're on 1 and 2 on the grid.
This is a massively serious accusation.
Massively, yeah.
I mean, we can't gloss over this. This is one driver saying to another, I'm literally going to stick you in the wall at the start of the race. It's incendiary, isn't it?
Oh, massively. But the key thing, I think, with what has then followed it is that George says he sort of woke up the next day and thought, he must have been joking. I'll come up to him on the driver's parade. I'll have a laugh and a joke with him. And Max, I think, has interpreted that as, well, you're two-faced. And he said that outright to Dutch media, which I thought, if you're going to say we shouldn't get personal, that's pretty on the line from Max. And he clearly had things that he wanted to say after the race, even though he'd won the race, and if anything, this could have been put to bed. And then I think George obviously has heard these comments and gone, well, I've lost all respect for George, as I said, the two-faced thing. And he, in his mind, feels that he has to reply. And I understand that he's gone to Mercedes and said, well, I'm going to say this, and then they've come up with this whole, right, this is how it's going to work. And it's clearly an organised strategy, but it works on so many levels. I just think that there's strategic elements to it. And I think, people may say in the comments, oh, you're just making a meal of this, a big deal of it. Two things to say to that. One, this is what I love about Formula One. I love the needle and the fight over
No,
everything.
you love the long
scraps.
runs and the tyres.
I do love that a bit too much. I know you despise me for that. But anyway, it's a broad church, Formula One. That's what we like about it. But yeah, it's with what's gone on here. I think George Russell had every right to try and get Max Verstappen a penalty. Max Verstappen doing it to Lando Norris in the race the next day. Massively disingenuous for Max to go, this attempt at doing it is fine, but this other one isn't. But also, just the mind game elements to it. We don't know what's actually been said. We're pretty sure that Max did say something.
Yeah.
Because he was then asked in this Dutch media session, George has said, you said this. Oh, it wasn't like that. Well, what was it then? Oh, it was something else. So he is covering up something that he said. And my understanding is that it's been likened to what Liam Lawson said to Fernando Alonso said about him in Austin, which was, I'm gonna screw you over here, and that's it. This is just how they talk to each other.
It's mind games.
It's mind games.
It's mind games, and I think that this is all shaping up for next year. I think the bigger picture is the fact that George is now inheriting that number one position at Mercedes. He's kind of grown in stature, responsibility within that team. He's also director of the GPDA. So he's kind of elevated himself up a number of levels, really, in terms of this experienced driver without the experience. He hasn't been in Formula One since first year in 2019. So he's only been here relatively short amount of time, but he is sort of growing in personality and stature, and I think this is a case of him getting his elbows out and anticipating after 2 wins this year, maybe 3 at Spa. Obviously, he was
technically
a bit I'm happy about that, but 2 wins this year, and I think he feels confident that he can take that fight to Max, and maybe he's already laying that groundwork ready for next year. I will not be taking any nonsense from you, mister.
I think this is exactly what Mercedes are. They feel confident in where they're going, and they want Toto. I spoke to Toto after the session, and he said, "I'd like to see this from George. I like that fire from it." And because there's always been this question mark. He's had Lewis Hamilton's number this season, but how good is Lewis ultimately compared to how he was at his peak? What is George Russell's ultimate peak? I think it'd be fantastic to know. Max has talked about what he could have done in a McLaren this year. What could George have done? Because I think there's so many elements that he's more feisty than people give him credit for. He has this image of very clean cut, sort of weird foppish haircut, very sort of straight lace, but actually, calling out Valtteri Bottas spectacularly back in 21 when they were fighting for their seat. He does have an edge to him. So having him in a championship winning car,
I think we just don't. It's at odds
until today. Well,
perception.
It bursts out at various points. But I think I'd just like to make a point about what Max Verstappen does. I think Mercedes, their strategy is this is the first shot in the 25 war. I think for Max, this is just who he is. This isn't, I must get one over on George. This is who he is. This is just absolutely what he does. And I think it benefited him because it's my understanding that if you look at what happened at the start in Qatar, the graphics come up and you can kind of clearly see it. George makes a better start and then the second phase is not as good. The suggestion is that George really could have done a bit more to avoid that. And I just wonder whether there was something in his mind going, I'm about to crash with this guy on my right, and it just got to it. And therefore Max wins the mindset, wins the mind game battle there.
He's got that psychological edge.
And they claim that they don't happen. It's complete lies. It's all the time. They're always laying markers on one another. And like I said, this is what I enjoy about Formula One, including all those tyres.
We've got to talk about the championship as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we've got to talk about that. McLaren versus Ferrari. Who's going to come out on top? Who's going to win the Constructors' Championship? McLaren, quickest car for most of this year. They're not going to stuff it up, are they?
I don't think so. I think the corner types, the circuit here favours the McLaren well enough, and Norris has gone spectacularly well here over the years. Also, Charles Leclerc, I asked him a question in the Ferrari, the same session that all the drivers have been doing today, and Charles made a point which actually I was just like, oh my goodness, this is not a good omen for you, Ferrari. Ferrari have never won at the Aston Marina circuit. McLaren have. Ferrari's never won here, so it would need something unprecedented for them to succeed. But yeah, Lando getting that penalty last weekend, it has kept the door ajar. So yeah, it's still relatively open, all that being said. But yeah, and again, we talk about how Max and George's argument has sort of blown things up. There was already loads of storylines happening anyway.
Yeah, we've got Lewis Hamilton.
Massive.
Hamilton leaving Mercedes. We've got Sergio Perez's future still in doubt.
Whatever his father's going to reveal on Monday, that remains to be seen.
Yes, but yeah, interesting because he's posted on social media a list of
claiming that he's got a list.
Claiming that he's got a list of people who are who are lying, about his son. So yeah, let's watch that drama unfold as well. We've got so much more coming your way. We've got qualifying, and before that we've got practice tomorrow. So plenty of loads to talk about. We've also got F1 Academy, we've got the F2 season as well still to go. So plenty to talk about.